I just want to point out on this page, it shows we still have a net deficit position when we take into consideration our portion of the pension liability of about $20 million. This is really nothing we can do anything about it. These are the overall state pension plan, and they tell us their estimated amount for our school district, or your school district, is $20 million. We have to record that. There's really nothing you can do as far as addressing that. The amount that was contributed into the pension plan each year is dictated by the state of Michigan. So it's really more just to let you know the fact that you're a deficit, that's pretty common with most of your school districts in the state of Michigan because of having to record that pension liability. So as far as how the school district, how we account for things and how you budget, that's reflected on page 8. So I'm going to go to page 8. So if you work across the page, you can see our general fund had an increase in fund balance of $280,000 this past year, and that brings your overall fund balance up to $2.5 million. Compared to last year, you had an increase of $86,000, so we had about a $200,000 increase there. And main thing that has to do with is our federal revenue. Our overall federal revenue was up over $700,000 this year. It was about $500,000 district-wide last year. Now it's about $1.2 million. A lot of that money is special COVID-related grants, and you're going to continue to see that over the next 2 years. There's a lot of federal money that's still going to be coming in this 21, 22, and 22, 23 school year. It's a one-time revenue. A lot of it is tied to, you have to have expenditures related to that. But if you look at this coming year, not only are you going to have that federal money, you also have a pretty substantial increase in the foundation allowance that could create another $500,000 or more state money that's going to hit in this 21-22 year as far as state funding. Working across the page, the capital project fund, $400,000. We really didn't have any activity in that fund. I just had a little bit of interest. That is a capital project fund that's really not tied to any bond money. It's not tied to the early learning center. It's just money that's been put into that capital project fund over prior years to be used for future capital project needs. The ELC capital project fund, you can see that had $239,000 at the end of the year. So that's kind of going to switch over from the standpoint, once the money's spent, that capital project fund is going to go away, and then you're actually going to have the just the reporting of the activity within the early learning center, which typically would either be set up, captured within the general fund, or you could set up a new special revenue fund if you wanted to capture it that way. The food service fund, you can see we had an increase of $68,000 compared to a loss of $30,000 a year ago. Again, that can be tied to increased federal revenue. There's about $200,000 additional federal revenue that came into the food service fund this past year. The one thing we have to watch in that fund, because our fund balance is now at $171,000, we have to basically have a spend down plan. We have to coordinate with the state of Michigan of a spend down plan to spend that fund balance down to the point where it's less than 3 months of activity. That's where they want that fund balance to be. And then the last column is our other non-major governmental funds, which that is reported on a little more details on page 46. So that is comprised of our student activity, our library fund, and then our debt fund. The student activity fund had a drop of $30,000 this year, and a lot of that has to do with back to the COVID. We had limited activity. There's just not a lot of these things that would happen in the past that would generate revenue just didn't occur this past year. The library fund, pretty stable from year to year. They had an increase of $96.27 compared to $3,000 last year. And then the 2016 debt retirement fund, you can see we ended the year at $271,000 fund balance, and that is going to be paid off in this 21-22 year. So that fund will go away at the end of this coming year, and that any remaining money there typically will be transferred out of that fund, more than likely over to the general fund. One other thing this year, because of our federal revenue being up over $750,000, we were required to have what's called a single audit. It's a federal requirement that we have to do a compliance audit on some of that federal money. And any governmental unit that has over $750,000 is subject to this. We haven't had to have a single audit it's probably been over 10 years. The threshold used to be a lot lower, but we did have this past year. The one finding we had, it really just has to do with that fund balance in the food service. You know, it's a mandatory finding that basically says, you know, we know we have excess fund balance. We're going to deal with the state. And really what's created by that is just that all that additional federal money that came in at the same time, you know, kind of restricted on what we spend the money on. So that's what created that fund balance there. So that's kind of a quick summary on how the district came out this year. Again, you know, on a financial standpoint, they had a really good year. And then if you look at in the short term, the next 2 or 3 years, the funding looks really good. The question is, where is it going to head after that? You know, we went through a time period, roughly 10 years or so, where our state funding was stagnant for a few years, and a lot of districts took a pretty big hit on their fund balance during that time frame. Does anyone have any questions at this time?
Scott, I've got a couple of questions. Picking up on your comment about the compliance audit, will or is there a compliance audit in regard to the federal funds that we use those funds according to the guidelines? Will that come into play at some point? Or?
Yes and no. What happens is depending on how much money you received and your total revenue, there's specific programs that we look at. We don't look at all federal programs. We do some testing, you know, to make sure, you know, that, you know, did we spend more than the grant amount or less than the grant amount where we have to defer some of that money. But the specific program that we tested on this, I believe, is the food service program. And then, so our compliance testing would be based on that program.
What I was asking about is that the federal money has limited things it can be used for. Do you audit to the extent to give satisfaction that it's been used for those purposes?
Yes and no. We don't. Do we look at all expenditures? No, we do not. Okay. But we do look at, you know, overall expenditures, time frame of the expenditures, in general, what were they spent on? But yeah, okay. You know, we're not, as an auditor, we don't look at all those expenditures.
All the uses. Okay.
No.
It looks to me like the difference between the budget and the actual, which is about $500,000, was primarily because of expenditures. Our revenue was pretty much on, but we did a good job of controlling expenditures. Would that be your observation?
Yes.
Also?
And there's actually, that's reported on page, page 39 kind of gives you the comparison of what our original budget was, our final budget, and then compare it to actual.
Okay.
And a lot of those expenditures, I mean, typically most districts budget high just because of the budget rules where you're never supposed to go over your budget amount. So you do build in a buffer. And it is, especially the last few years with all these new grants and expenditures tied to grants, where maybe you were planning on spending money in one area, but because you had used the money for ESSERs, well, maybe it wouldn't qualify for at-risk, or you can't use it for Title I. So there's that shifting that sometimes that has to come into play.
So the federal revenue that we've gotten at this point does not include any of the ESSER 2 or 3, right?
Correct.
It's just the first money and then ESSER 1. That's the only money that we've reflected at this point, right?
Right.
Okay. The money owed from general fund to the debt retirement fund, I'm kind of curious about. We've had that on occasion. Why there would be money owed from the general fund to the debt retirement?
That specifically has to do with, there's some state money that comes in that's tied to personal property tax. And this is probably been going on in the last 5 or 6 years. Where the state came in when they changed the rules on industrial personal property and how they're taxed. what they said is, oh, they're going to try and make some of that money up. So what happened is we get a check from the state of Michigan because it is directly related to the debt millage. It has to go to the debt funds, but it was deposited in the general fund.
Okay.
And that's what created that due to the debt fund. And I've talked to Lisa about that, really. So she realizes that money's got to get over there. Specifically this year, with it being the final year, we want to make sure that that money's over there to determine, you know, how much really we need to make that final debt payment.
So talking about the debt retirement, Scott, just a minute. We've got final payments due in November of this year, which will pay off the debt, right? Okay. If I looked at what was owed on both of the bond issues, there's about $100,000 that we're going to have to raise. How are we going to raise that between now and November 1?
Well, actually, the final payment is in May. There's an interest payment in November, and then May of next year is the final debt payment.
Oh, May of 2022?
Yep.
So we'll have the winter tax collections.
Right, so
then.
we'll have that
Okay,
tax money
perfect.
come in, that will
Good.
cover that.
Okay. Last question I have, and maybe this is for Scott too, the $240,000 that's left in the Early Learning Center, is that committed? I know it's restricted, but is that committed?
Some of that has already been spent. We do have just under $100,000 left.
Okay.
in that.
So a good portion of that's been committed or spent by now?
Yes.
Okay. So what would your overall assessment be?
As I mentioned, there's a lot of new money coming in, you know, between this year and the next couple of years. What I try and tell my districts is, you know, a lot of this is one-time funds, where, like I said, if you look 10 years or so ago, the districts that went into that time period with a fund balance in the 20 to 30% range, while they still may have had some cash flow issues during that time period, they came out of it good. The districts that were at about 10% or less going into that time period flipped either a deficit fund balance or struggled from a cash standpoint. So just, you know, be careful, you know, going forward, knowing that this is one-time money, and that, you know, we've had occasions in the past where we had multiple years where the state did not increase our foundation allowance at all.
Any more questions for Scott? Okay. Thank you,
All right.
Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, on to routine matters, and we need to approve the minutes of our last meeting. I hope everyone had a chance to look those over. I thought they looked good.
Motion.
Support. Motion and support. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Treasurer's report.
Yeah, as of September 1st, 2021, district had $1,557,088.56. As of September 30th, it is $1,529,604.95. Seems like a lot of spending in September, but we are starting the school year, ordering a lot of different things, and we have additional staff as well. You need to order additional items is for that. Food service balance sheet there, starting September 1st, 2021, $397,676.54. Ending balance for food service is $403,351.31.
Any questions for Mr. Acom?
Scott, the $1 million borrowing on here, that is short-term, right? That'll come from the payments that we get between now and next fiscal year?
Yes, that would come from the state aid.
Right, okay.
Do I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
So moved. Or?
Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Thanks, Scott. Matt, we need to consider general fund invoices for payment.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to pay from the general fund, checks 15921 through 15959, 16200 through 16215, and 72214 through 72701, for a total of $719,582.81. And from food services, checks 15970 through 15991, and 161151 through 161161, for $33,700.60.
Support.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Motion from Matt, and we have support. Is there any further discussion or questions?
I had a couple, Scott. One was the Apple Incorporated for $188,000, and some of those are marked as ESSER funds. Now, these would be ESSER 2, right?
Correct.
That first portion of ESSER 2?
Correct.
Okay. I had one more, just a general question. The conceptual drawing for the parking lot from Fleece and Vandenbrink, is that for the east lot? Is that what?
Yes, that was to look at potential of parking over this
Okay,
creek here.
so that's a preliminary site plan, it looks like?
Yes, and it appears that Eagle will probably not approve that plan.
Okay.
We have a motion and support. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thanks, Matt. Reports and communications. I don't believe I have anything to report on this month. Superintendent.
Any questions on the written report? Am I allowed to say I don't have anything to read from Skip?
No.
Just a couple of additions to that and some highlights there. I did have a meeting with Mr. Knapp and some members of our community this past week to discuss how we can reach our community that's not connected to the school. It was a good meeting. I discussed a lot of different things of mailings and bringing back the district newsletter, different things like that. I'm going to continue meeting with this group on a monthly basis to start, just to see what we can do to be reaching the parts of our community that are not connected to the school. Little Wheels dedication. First, I guess I would say Little Wheels is off and running. We have 44 preschool students at this time in Little Wheels. We were also just approved for 16 GSRP slots. This would be a tuition-free opportunity for our families. Last I heard, we have 13 of those slots filled within the students currently attending Little Wheels. So that is a good program to have, and we're excited to have it. The Little Wheels dedication has been changed. We've had some supply chain issues and different things to December 1st. So we will not have it in the end of October, but we will have it December 1st for that. ESSER 2 is still being allocated, and ESSER 3, if you recall, the funds were released for ESSER 3, but only 65% of the funds. The additional 35% was just released because the United States Department of Education approved Michigan's plan. They had to withhold that 35%, but that too has been released now. Our student count, we are currently at 1,010 students. This is down from earlier predictions from this summer, but we are currently enrolled at 1,010 students. This past Wednesday was our official count day.
Is that blended, Scott, or is that an actual?
That's an actual count.
That's an actual count.
Yeah. So food service, I don't know if you guys have heard, but we've had some food shortages and getting the supply chain back up and running. So food service, they have been working really hard and being very creative and very appreciative of that. There's actually, from what I heard, is a potential milk shortage. So they're working on a waiver, not necessarily MSTEP, but Michigan's working on a waiver to, instead of providing milk, providing juice for lunch to help offset that shortage. Interestingly enough.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That is very interesting.
That's very interesting.
But that's all I had, unless there are other questions.
So Scott, would it be safe to say that our blended count's going to be below the 1,000?
You know, I'm not sure. I have to check with Lisa on that, because I know that you can opt to use a 3-year blend instead of the actual count. So whichever one's higher is typically, obviously, the one we go with, so.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Principals, whoever would like to start. David.
I was given the microphone first, so I'll start. So just to highlight a couple things that are in my board report, we have finished NWA testing. All of our parent reports went home. So parents received the data that shows not just how their student scored this year, but how they scored last year as well, so they can see whether or not their student has shown growth. We typically see a drop in the fall because of summer slide. Our kindergarten students, they only have one data point, so their reports, it's not as fancy as some of our older students. And then I included a letter kind of explaining to parents what they see on that report, because it's a lot of teacher lingo, if you will. And so we tried to break it down for them so they knew what they were looking at. We'll try to go over those scores at parent-teacher conferences on the 28th as well, just to highlight those. We have worked on using that data to identify students who are in need of reading support, and so we have been working on IRIPs to go along with third grade reading law. I think it was last week or the week before, I think it was last week, we had our K2 teachers get together, no, K3 teachers get together and start working in that system and developing those plans so that we can get those to parents soon, because we have a window of time that we need to get those to parents. So the teachers are working on those. We are, for November PD, we'll be looking at, to help our K2 people, we'll be looking at doing some foundational skills work, some phonics to support reading and reading instruction. And that'll be our K2 teachers who receive that training, and then our 3-5 teachers, they're going to work on using Illuminate and using Illuminate to develop assessments to go along with all of the math stuff that we're doing this year and supporting our students in achieving math concepts. So yeah, so we're entering a very busy time of year. There's a lot going on, a lot coming up. We do have family night coming up on November 4th as well, and we're hosting that night to go along with our Title I program. So we're developing that as well. We got some parent feedback. We're using that feedback to develop some sessions that'll be appropriate for parents and families and support them this year as we do the school year. So we're rolling right along, keeping busy. Do you have any questions for me?
Thanks, David.
I feel like I'm always the middle child, right in the middle. So, yeah. So we are also in the middle of testing. We finished up NWEA and moving some students in and out of various interventions that we offer at the middle school level. If students are increasing their achievement, we're moving them out. If other students are demonstrating the need, we move them in. So lots of that. I feel like it was a really good launch in the school year for the month of September. We just did our September PEP assembly, and we focused on the idea of Ramblers as team players, talking to the kids about how on a team, individuals on a football team don't win. The team either wins or loses together. And schools can be like that too. We want to make sure that all of our students feel like they're part of the team, that we're an inclusive community. So that was a really good event last Friday. Wanted to thank the board for encouraging us to look at the lunchroom schedule. And as it turns out, through help from Mr. Biller and the middle school staff, we were able to identify a 15-minute slice of time that would just barely allow our 8th grade kids with some other shuffling to be able to get in and get their lunch between when the 7th graders finished and the CTC kids start coming in. The cascading dominoes meant that now the 6th graders and the 7th graders have access to the middle school gym. 8th grade has access to the high school gym. So as of right now, And for the rest of this year, all 3 classes will have access to that gym or one of the gyms during lunch. And so that was a win. It is amazing how many moving pieces there are, even for just a small change like that. I've told people it's kind of like a Rubik's Cube. You get one side all matched up with the right color, but as soon as you start trying to get the next side, it can mess up something else. But after about 2 weeks, we figured out all of the little hiccups and glitches, and we're able to get that in place. Moving on from there, the middle school, especially the 8th grade team, is interested in potentially going back to a 4-section schedule. Right now they're at 3. Not sure if that's possible. That's a much bigger and more difficult challenge, but we're looking at doing that, the advantage being that they would get slightly smaller class sizes. Some of our class sizes are 28, 29. I think 1 section's at 30. 4 sections would drop that down closer to 22. And so if we're able to make that improvement, we will. But schedules are very complex, especially with shared staff. And so Ryan and I have to be cognizant not only of how that affects the middle school, but also how it could affect the high school. So working on that. Otherwise, just really excited about the Ramblon Award. We're up to into the 70s. Got lots of kids winning that award for citizenship. It's been really nice calling parents to say, hey, your son is doing a great job or your daughter's doing a great job. Because usually when I call, they think, what did my son do? And it's nice when it's a good thing. So any questions? I know that we're going to be talking more about data a little further in the board meeting. So I'm saving some of that information for then. But any other questions I can answer for you?
I'll just say that I communicated with you guys at last month. My communication at the board meeting wasn't the best, because my concern wasn't that they weren't getting in the gym as much as it was that our lobby was going to get
Right.
abused.
Well, it's both.
And I appreciate that you put the work into
The kids were mostly concerned about getting in the gym, so we're about the kids, and they're really excited about that. I'm glad that we could come up with that solution because it was not immediately visible. It took a lot of looking, and so thanks to Mr. Biller and others who helped me to find that. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. How are we doing? It's good to see everybody. Lots of things, like I said, going on. As principals, this is my first year here in the high school of going through what we call an NWEA testing. So we are going to continue this, so it will be moved to K-12, and this is our first experience with it. So many of our teachers, it was the first time learning this process. And the reason we're doing this, obviously, is so that we can look more closely at student data, be able to benchmark their data, and at least 3 times a year be able to give feedback or potentially some interventions to those students if we see them slipping. So it is going to be a nice data point piece for our high schoolers and tracking them instead of after the fact with an SAT or PSAT data point. Excuse me, we're going to use NWEA. So we are going to continue that now, this being a first year. So thank you to my English and my math teachers for being supportive and understanding for doing that, and also Becky Rodenbaugh for helping coordinate all those makeup sessions for kids if they didn't make it the first day. We did have an opportunity with our CTC connection with our Wexford Misaki Career Tech. Mr. Tim Rigling, the director there, was able to connect us to some manufacturing tours of BMP Manufacturing and Cadillac Fabrication. Some of you might have noted even somebody got famous on the news. So we did have a Cadillac Fabrication student also. He was in the other group that I had. So it was nice to see that, though, and the kids kind of have an idea of what goes on in the quote-unquote real world. Now, for any of you that have a freshman student or understand the freshman student brain, this experience was a good one for them, but again, they may not recall it until later on. So we do revisit these types of experiences with them for education, and this year we're doing that in our freshman focus classes with Mr. Kors and Mr. Niemeyer. So that is all a part of their educational plan, is to have these experiences, be able to draw from, to be able to ask themselves if they'd like to see themselves in those experiences, and we're thankful for CTC to be able to provide those experiences to us. Kids had a good time. I do want to say, speaking of Career Tech Center, we do have a new program this year that allows our students to get a little taste of what it is in the educational field. So unfortunately tonight we have one of our students, Aaliyah Kitson, in the wave. Leah, there you go. Leah's there. As part of her program is to come to a board meeting, and so to experience this form of education, as well as what they do out at the school. Kata Cotter is the other student, so those seniors are having that experience, and that's why they're here. So glad that they're doing that. We would like to attempt to grow our own and keep our own here in this area. So that's thanks to Amy Solani at the CTC Center for taking that on. We did have our 50th anniversary celebration this last weekend, and luckily the rain held off, and it was a perfect evening, a great time, and I know that there was a lot of things that were either donated that generated money and funds, not only for the football team, but also for the senior class and the concession stand. They made a really good gain. It was just a great night overall, real good feel, and we thank those team members from the 1970 and 71 team to be able to come back and experience that with us. PSAT and SAT, that's this week. We have testing rolling, normal fall testing on Wednesday, and with that, our juniors will be taking the NMSQT. This is the qualifier for scholarship money. So they'll be taking that, our juniors will. And then this year, College Board is allowed our seniors to elect, if they would like to, take a choice and take that SAT again. So they will be taking the SAT. 17 of them actually right now have signed up to do that again. Not all of them. Thank you to Mr. Vanna, our senior class advisor. We've arranged an NMC trip up in Traverse City to visit the college and all they have to offer. So we have that as the other offering to our seniors. So that is Wednesday. Last thing, parent-teacher conferences coming up here at the end of the month, October 28th. That's a half day of school, so students will dismiss at 11:35. But our conferences are in person, and 1 to 5 and 6 to 8, no appointment necessary. Come on in and talk. We will also be giving out family reports at that time too, to kind of cut down on the cost of mailing. It's amazing how much mail is costing these days, but we're going to try to see people and give those out. If we don't see them, we'll make sure family reports for NWEA, as well as a grade report card, go home. So, and as always, McBain.org, click on the high school. All of our high school announcements are listed there, as well as the app. Thank you, Dylan. And Jake, the our app, just click on there, the announcements. Everything that we read throughout the day for kids are accessible through the app as well as online. So try to keep everybody updated. Any questions?
I had one more comment for Mr. Wisner. I was hit up this morning by my 5th grade daughter about watchdogs, so it sounds like that's going to go ahead this year. Oh, I was filled in. She's very excited. So good to see it coming back.
Ryan, I have a quick question.
Yes.
When they have the high school parent-teacher conferences, if someone's high risk, do you try to set them up an appointment?
Yeah, we're having more of those intentional things. What I've challenged my teachers to do is to reach out to those prior to that event. So it's not just that event to set up that time period, but we're making multiple contacts even before that.
Okay.
So we sent out the halfway point for this 9 weeks. We sent out only D's and E's in terms of a record. And so hopefully we're fostering those conversations far before a parent-teacher conference even. Okay. And we're open to doing that when parents or guardians are available to meet. We have to be very cognizant and aware. Many of our people have crazy schedules, including second and third shift, and we want to make sure that we can meet with them.
Okay, that's what I just wondered, because sometimes it's a little overwhelming to walk into that hallway and there's lines of people and you're not exactly sure where to go. And you know, I always appreciated just having an appointment time. So I just want to make sure that those parents maybe that have a student that is struggling with a few had opportunity.
Well, and to be honest with you, sometimes of the walk-in on one single day is really not the best way to service some of that stuff. Right. So that's why I've prompted a lot of my teachers, if kids are struggling, we should have already had a contact home to parents to try to foster that conversation. Again, if a sit down is better, then we can meet even before then. So.
Yes, thank you.
I have a comment for David again. I really appreciate your reading at night. That's very, very good.
So fun.
It's fun.
Okay, thanks, principals. On to our district data report.
Yep, so the principals have prepared a little presentation for you regarding our state data. So we're going to want to go ahead and head down so we can see the screen there. Hard to set up another screen here when we have classes in here every day too, so.
to start again. If we go to the next slide, I don't think there's anything on this slide. So this is just graphs of how we performed for third, fourth, and fifth grade. So we're looking at proficiency scores overall, and then and so it's all color-coded. So for third grade ELA, what you see at the top of that is our students who scored proficient and advanced. So they're all considered a proficient, but advanced would be that their score range put them above the benchmark for third grade for ELA. So we're 62% of students last year on third grade ELA were proficient and advanced, and then you can see the breakdown below that. For the two, 25% of students were partially and 13% of students were not proficient. And then when we look at third grade math, so the very top we have over half of our students were proficient or advanced on the math. And this presentation was shared with them, yes? So, okay, so that if you want to look back at it later, you can do that. So that's third grade. If we shift to fourth grade, ELA, 43% proficient in ELA, and then you can see the breakdown there. A larger population of students who are not proficient on this one, and then fourth grade math, 41.9% proficient and advanced. Lots of kids at partially proficient, so looking at how do we move them to proficient for fifth grade this year. So a lot of those kids, that could be like a point, 2 points. We might be talking one more question they get right, they score in the proficient range. So how do we get them there? How do we move them up? And I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing in the elementary to address that toward the end. If we switch to fifth grade, so these are now our sixth graders, 43% proficient and advanced on ELA, and then for math, 40% proficient and advanced for math. So of course, we know that last year was their first time taking the assessment since the 2019 school year. So we missed a year of testing. We missed a lot of school because of shutting down in March. We missed a lot of school with classes being out. What the data doesn't show is the number of classrooms who were out of school at that time. You got updates on that throughout the year. So there were some classrooms that were hit more than others, and they were out more often because we just shut down entire classrooms in the elementary. So that's what this data doesn't show, is like, well, who were those students and where did they fall? Because we know that they missed some instruction because of that. So that's always something to keep in mind as we're looking at this too, is they missed a round of testing. Those the fourth graders, that was their first time taking the MSTEP. They had never taken it before because they missed the third grade year. So we need to keep that in mind as well, I think, because they just don't have that experience of seeing it and doing it. So then the next slide is fifth grade. They take all subject areas. So they also took science and social studies. So science, 33% of them proficient and advanced. Lots of kids and partially proficient. So they just get, a couple more right. Does that move them up? And then social studies, we have 11% proficient and advanced, and they all fell in the proficient range. Lots of kids at partially proficient again. So the next slide shows a breakdown for us of 2019 to 2021. This is not, so it's not following the students. It's just the 2019 third graders compared to the 2021 third graders. Right? The 2019 third graders tested last year as fifth graders. This graph doesn't, or this chart, this table, excuse me, doesn't show you that. So it just shows you a little bit of a breakdown for that. So you can see there that third grade, we had a little more proficiency in reading. Math was about the same. Fourth grade, again, those are our students who did not take the MSTEP the previous year. This was their first exposure to the MSTEP test, so we see a drop there. And then fifth grade, a bit of a drop there as well. I think I have one more slide for mine. So local comparisons. So we're looking at us compared to Cadillac and then compared to the state of Michigan. So we compared to Cadillac because in our ISD, they are the ones that we're kind of neck and neck with a lot. And they do very well on the MSTEP, so that's why we're comparing to them. So you can just kind of see that in many of those areas, our proficiency scores were comparable to Cadillac or better, and then for our state averages, I think for every assessment, we were above the state average except for fifth grade social studies. Fourth grade ELA. We were a little bit below the state average, and fifth grade ELA just a little bit below. So did pretty well in our local area, did pretty well compared to the state. So we have great teachers, we have great curriculum, they're teaching every day, they're doing the work. We have some new things in place this year to help with math and identifying math needs and developing interventions for their math needs. The other thing that we will continue to build on, the elementary has done this for a couple of years now, we're going to continue to build on this, is we have a system available to us called Illuminate. And in Illuminate is a two-piece thing. You can build assessments in Illuminate, or you can pull assessments to give students, and then it's also a way to track data and to track their progress on those standards. So as a teacher, I could go in and I could say, I wanted to see how my students are doing with a literary text with key ideas and details, which is one of the standards at every grade level for ELA. So I can pull an assessment that's already built, or I can modify one and build it to look how I want to look and to assess what I want to assess. The nice thing about those assessments is the language is very similar to what students would see on an MSTEP. So the more that we can use the Illuminate assessments to check for student understanding, we're also giving them more exposure to the types of items that they will see, so that when they get in front of an MSTEP, they've seen questions like that before, they know what to expect, they understand what they're being asked to do. So we'll continue that with reading. And the elementary started doing that for reading based on MSTEP data and noticing that key ideas and details was a relative weakness in the elementary, kind of across all three grade levels. For math, we're going to start doing that as well. So on November 1st, we're going to train the 3rd through 5th grade teachers on using Illuminate to do math assessments, so that the students start to see questions that are worded in a way that are similar to what they will see on the MSTEP. Because I think that's another piece for us in seeing our proficiency scores increase, is for them to have more exposure to those types of questions. So that's the elementary profile overview, if you will. Do you have any questions for me before I pass off the mic? It would have been administered in April for the 5th grade and in May for 3rd and 4th grade.
All right, so the middle school also takes the MSTEP test. I just wanted to comment for a minute about the MSTEP test because it's a fairly new test, and this is a test that only students in Michigan take. A lot of our other tests, like the PSAT, is a national test, and so kids across the country take the test, which makes it nice. We can make meaningful comparisons from state to state. Also, NWEA, which is our in-house diagnostic test, we give that 3 times a year, allows us to compare our students and our school to other kids across the nation, so it's very, very useful. In Michigan, we give the MSTEP test as our state-authorized assessment, and it is a very, very rigorous test. I am a data guy. I am absolutely not, nor will I ever be anti-testing. But I just wanted to preface some of the scores with and David, you see this with him too, like, wow, 42% of the kids, it seems like less than half of the kids are testing as proficient at this. At some point, it might be worth asking the question of like, okay, so what's the problem? Is it really true that, because you can go from really impoverished districts that are struggling in all areas and they're not doing well in the MSTEPs, then you can go to like Birmingham or very affluent and they're not doing well either. And so it's, and you'll see that more as I kind of run through the data, because it's kind of miraculous where kids in Michigan in 7th grade, they're testing 20 percentage points lower, and then 8th grade, all of a sudden they take PSAT, and it jumps up, and now everyone's proficient again because it's a different test. So it's just, it allows us to make comparisons, but I did want to put that out there, that the test is quite rigorous. So let's go ahead and change the first slide. This is our 6th grade reading and our 7th grade reading. Same chart as David had. You've got at the very top, the light blue is the total percent of our student population who are testing at proficient or advanced. And so 6th graders, you got just under half of our kids are considered proficient by the state of Michigan. That next group is the yellow group. That's the group where we've got, like David said, the biggest payoff in terms of our interventions. How do we take kids who are proficient and slide them up to the next category? What you'll also notice is that the not proficient tends to grow a little bit. Like when he was down in 3rd grade, you might only see 10 or 20% of the kids who are testing it not proficient. As the kids age and the curriculum becomes more rigorous, sometimes that bottom category can grow. And so our challenge as educators, these kids might be receiving special education services, might have received title services in elementary. How are we remediating that to make sure that those kids are not falling behind? So this is in reading overall, and we'll compare this to regional schools and also to the state of Michigan on my last slide. But it's actually not too bad that we're right around 50% of our kids are testing as proficient on their 6th and 7th grade reading test. Go ahead and hit the next one, Jake. So math is not as good as our reading. We're definitely stronger in reading than in math on this test. We've got about 31% of our 6th graders last year tested as proficient or advanced. And you'll notice that most of them tested as proficient. Only 6% of them tested at advanced. I did talk to David. We do have a fairly new math curriculum. It's too early to be making any kind of meaningful comparisons like how is our curriculum performing. But over the next couple of years, we'll want to keep an eye on that. If that's a trend that continues, we may want to look at what is causing the deficits compared to other schools. 7th grade math was a little bit better. We got 38% about, and again, a little bit more of the kids at advanced, 29.7% at proficient. Okay, hit the slide, Jake. Okay, 8th grade science and social studies. We've got about 33% of our 8th graders proficient in science. And I do need to give a huge shout out to our social studies department because that 42%, that I believe is the highest number I have ever seen at the middle school level. It is not common to see that many kids proficient in social studies. And so I was really proud that, I've inherited some really good teachers here. They're making us look good. That's really quite outstanding, and you'll see that coming up. The 8th grade kids don't take the MSTEP for reading and math. They actually bump over to PSAT. So let's take a look at that. Here you can see the blue line on top is the advanced, and the light blue is proficient. So you might remember, okay, so we were at what, like 40-something%? Well, once the kids get to 8th grade, those numbers tend to jump up because they're taking a different test. And this, again, is a national test. It's a test that kids take across the country. So we can make comparisons between Michigan and Ohio or Michigan and California or whatever. Can't do that with MSTEP. So it's strictly in-house. Not bad at all. 66% proficient or advanced in math. And you can see that most of the kids in math are, in fact, advanced. So that's quite excellent results for that. You can hit the slide, Jake. This is a regional comparison across northern Michigan and Michigan itself. So as you can see, that far right-hand column, that's the state average. We are beating the state average in every area. Our nearest neighbor, larger school district, is Cadillac. They're doing quite well, but we are beating them in most areas. The one I meant to highlight, if you look at the 8th grade English Language Arts PSAT, I've got us highlighted. That was statistically a tie. We're separated by 0.3 of a point there. But you can see that McBain is doing very well in reading. We're beating Cadillac by about 7 points in 6th grade language arts, about 12 points in 7th grade language arts, so ahead of Cadillac. And then, like I said, the English language arts in 8th grade is essentially a dead heat. They are doing quite well at math, especially Cadillac 7th grade math on that MSTEP test, 57%. That's really unusual. I don't know if that's an anomaly or if they've just got they've got a really good math teacher. I'm not sure. That's excellent, excellent work. And then down to the 8th grade, the PSAT, we did beat them in math. And then social studies, again, you can see that our 42.5% compares to Cadillac at 31%, 11% higher. And the state of Michigan average, only 25% of the kids across the state can test at proficient in social studies. We're getting close to doubling that. So really proud of our social studies teachers. And then science, again, and I couldn't find the data for Cadillac. I don't know if they didn't give MSTEP science. There was just no data pulling up on the state reporting site. State of Michigan, 22.6% of our Michigan kids can test proficient in science. We're about 10 points higher. We're at 33.8. Was interesting, just another conversation that came out of this data. I was talking to our new science teacher, Michelle Hill. She was observing that in her 7th hour advisory class, a lot of the kids didn't seem to have homework. I said, Michelle, check out our data. We've only got a third of our kids passing the science test. You do not have to use your advisory as a study hall. Let's get some science. Let's change our scores. And so she immediately jumped on board with that. She's got a huge background in forestry and parks and recreation, nature, biology, things like that. So she is actually basically turning that advisory class into a science elective to try to boost up our scores and make them go higher. So the data does get used. It's important to us as educators. It's hard for us to know if we're hitting our targets if we're not looking at the data. So I appreciate the opportunity to share this with you. Can I answer any questions for you? All right. Well, we will keep at it. We will continue to plan, do, check, and adjust.
Thank you, Mr. Mead. For the high school, when we look at, as Mr. Mead already explained, PSAT and SAT has been our life, and that's typically the test, the national normed test that we compare to. So much of the data that I'm going to present today is what our kids had taken for the springtime of 2021. Now, some of these, you might not be able to see the numbers, but I think it's most important to just see the visual. The top left, you'll notice these are all the same kids, by the way. This entire slide is all of our 9th grade kids last year. It'd be our current walking the hallway 10th graders. And these students with the PSAT, the ELA portion of that, in our district, we are on the district side there at 65%. The ISD is at 56, and the state is at 66. So just a tick under that for the ELA. The right side, blue and red, for math, you'll notice that the district, which would be us, is 47, 39, and, or excuse me, 33, and then 46. So again, this is a new thing too, because typically we are struggling in our math program, and I think this is the first time since I've been here that our math district is a percentage higher than the state average. We've always been below. So that is a point of noticing, and kudos also then to our 8th grade teachers, getting them ready to take that as well as our 9th grade teachers. You'll notice, though, a trend, and I like to talk about trends because trends involve what historical data that we've had. So you can see on the left-hand side, as it relates to English language arts and the students that took that above that, we have all the way back to 2016, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19. Of course, we did not test in the 1920 year, so that one's missing, right? So if you notice the MET, I want to look at the MET portion here. You'll notice that that green bar right there would be last spring's kids, as compared to the previous 3 years of testing for that 9th grade test. Now, those are all different kids. Each color bar represents a different cohort, but you can see it didn't necessarily drop off as much, and definitely we didn't score as well, but it's right there. It's not too far away. Again, the 4-year trend for math for 9th grade, our last 4 groups of 9th graders, I guess, that took this test for math, you'll notice too that even in one of those years, 2017-18, we even scored higher. So we're looking at this again, initial data, the who's and what's and why is the data saying what it is, I think is something for our teachers to dig into. As Mr. Mead said, and Mr. Wisner started for 3 years, our CPM new curriculum is underway, and our junior year right now, Algebra 2, Mr. Vanna is implementing that this year for the first year. So could it be a CPM help? Could it be our teachers? Could it be our kids? We're going to look into that and just continue to watch this data. But that, again, is a good noticing that at least our students, by the end of that first year, after the year of pandemic, still was able to score right around that same ballpark. 10th grade students, similar in a sense that you'll notice our ELA for 10th grade, which would be our juniors walking the hallways this year. As a 10th grade, we didn't score so well on our district level. It's a 48% to a 67% here, state average, and a 62% ISD. So that, again, highlights probably an earmark, something of we may need to remediate some of those things with our juniors this year before they take the SAT. Our 10th grade trend, though, if you look at the trend, the green bar of the MET, you'll notice that it's actually, if we look at it, about what we've done in the last 3 or 4 cohorts. So it's not too far off base, yet we have improvement to make. For math, the same. In 18-19, you can notice in the MET, our green bar there for those spring students, they still met above. There's more students percentage-wise that met than the year in 2018-19, our last testing year. And also, if you look closely to the previous 2 years, it's remarkably similar. So again, I think sometimes what you're seeing just through 9th and 10th grade data is we hear the media talk about learning loss. We hear all of this concern about kids being out of school. But I want to tell you that what I'm seeing in 9th and 10th grade here and sharing with you, the drops are there for some areas. However, in other areas, we need to celebrate how resilient our students have been, and that our testing data is not falling as quickly as the sky is falling sometimes that the media likes to represent. And I credit that, seriously I do, to our teachers and then the resiliency of our students. The last one is our 11th grade SAT. So this is what switches over. PSAT is a practice, okay, nationally normed with the students that are in that grade level. And again, these are SAT. So our SAT, which would be our seniors walking the hall this year, this was their junior year testing. We go district, and the blue bar is 62%, to 48 is the ISD average, and 56. So again, our 11th graders still last year, even though after a pandemic year, are still scoring above the ISD average and state. Our math comparison, if you notice this, 32%, which is above that 24% ISD piece, that blue bar, and then the blue bar for the state is 35%. So just 3% under. But again, if you look at the trend data, right? This is what I like to see. If we look at the MET, definitely see the ELA fall off there just a little bit, consistently about the 65, 66 percentile, and we drop down to about 56. That's what that green bar represents. So again, a little bit of fall off there, but remarkably, our math 4-year trend, you can see our MET obviously did not meet. This is an area that we are looking at. But our MET is at or near 17, 18, and we actually were slightly higher than 2 other cohort years. So again, I just want to be, as we look at this, you can see it more visually with the bars that way, and I wanted to express it that way to you. The last slide that I have here is some comparison data, and I know that's a lot of numbers and things, but the big one that you have to pay attention to is these 2 green ones. For our 11th grade students, for the English reading and writing component, our evidence-based reading and writing, 62% of our students in McBain, with our enrollment in all of our subgroup populations is what that shows for each of some of the similar demographic schools other than Cadillac. Obviously, they're the closest to us there, but Manton, Pine River, Lake City, Houghton Lake, even Pinconning, all as a percentage, we beat them all. So we have 62% here of the English and then 32% of the math. Again, that bodes well, I think, to our teachers, and that the resiliency factor, again, the first testing round after a pandemic year. So there's other pieces of information in there. All of that is on the websites and data sources, but I think if you guys wanted a copy of it, we'll be able to get that to you as well. So look at it. The last one, where do we go from here? Well, again, McBain students outperform area schools, mostly of those with like demographics. We're going to continue to support and focus on building building-wide literacy strategies and literacy components. Specifically, we may be looking more at the vocabulary area and intentional efforts for like informational text and things of that nature to cross subject matter. It would apply to both or all. Continue to support, of course, with those math components. In CPM, we're going to vet that and continue to look at that. And then how do we use that NWE leveraging data for benchmark? We're going to learn that process this year and get better at helping kids with interventions before they take the test. So that's the plan. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for all that work and info. That was quite a lot. Appreciate that. At this time in our board meeting, we're going to have a little discussion amongst us board members here. We have talked a little bit about possibly maybe doing something with an athletic booster of some sort. Here in McBain, we have, from what I know, I don't think we've ever had one. I know other schools do, and so it's something that's been kind of discussed a little bit behind the scenes, and so if there's any board members that have anything that they would like to say, or suggestions, or thoughts, now is the time.
Have we actually had anybody come forward and want to be in charge of it?
We have had some interest. I've had a couple people talk to me about that, about launching an athletic booster program. I think what we'd probably initially do is hold a meeting just for others that are interested in participating, and maybe have a little bit of a, I don't want to say an election, but an appointee or of sorts to just officer positions within the athletic boosters.
So what, I mean, where are they going to do the fundraising? I mean,
Yep, and that's what Mr. Mulder and I talked with, this individual who seems to be most motivated with it, is to make sure that they're not taking away from the other sports fundraising, like not taking away the concession stand from the seniors. McBain's been very successful with raising funds for their individual sports. You know, maybe this is something that they do a clothing store, they get a clothing line going where it's not sports affiliated, and then also looking at big purchase or big ticket items to help fundraise for. That's the one thing, is you don't want to take away from something that's already working well.
I think it's more looking at fundraising for the bigger ticket items, and I know that it was sometimes brought up during, like, when we were going for a bond, we were looking for some big ticket items that were going to be part of a bond. And if you know, if there were any comments that maybe weren't as favorable towards that, it was because of certain ticket items like that that were put into a bond. So a sports booster, it was just something that I had thought of and had kind of wondered why we didn't do it before, but not wanting to take away from the concessions for the seniors or different things like that. But I've had a couple parents reach out to me just wondering about, you know, what they could do to be part of it. And there are some bigger ticket items that, you know, the cross-country team, maybe having a team tent, or just different things that have been brought up that, you know, I don't think we're going to necessarily take $2,000 or $3,000 out of the general fund or out of some whatever to do that, but how are we going to support those teams in different things like that? Uniforms, all of those kinds of things. And maybe it is different fundraising tactics. I don't know where all of the things come from right now, like, you know, the baseball, golf outing, if that's put on by the baseball team and it all goes towards them, or, you know, how that all works, but just doing different things like that.
Mm-hmm. I don't recall that McBain's ever had a booster club, to my knowledge, and I don't, in the years I've been here, I don't think there's really been much discussion about it. For whatever reason, I don't know, it's kind of odd because there are a lot of it and a lot of very successful ones. Some communities, they're very, very majorly part of that. I guess my feeling would be that I think a boosters club, I think, has to be parent-driven. Because if it's not parent-driven, it's probably not going to be successful because they're the ones that have to make it work. You know, the school can't make that work. Right. The other thing, I am aware of some situations where it has become the source of conflict. So entering into this thing, there would have to be some very clearly defined definitions and responsibilities and goals and that kind of things. Because the last thing you want to do is to be the support group in conflict with the school. You know, that just makes everything look bad. So I think the potential for conflict is there. So going into it, there would be some very clearly defined definitions and that kind of stuff. And I think we'd have to be very sure that that the commitment, if we start one, is real and that it's long-term, because, you know, put all the effort into starting one and have it flop in 2 years, that's wasted effort. So you want to make sure that there's a real long-term commitment to make this thing work. A lot of successful ones out there.
Is there a basic set of guidelines that allow these boosters to go by?
It's hit or miss. We did launch a program or boosters in my previous district. And as Mr. Stahl had said, I mean, you had to have committed people to it or it fizzled out, where they had their own bylaws and different things that they follow just for their own, I guess, so they don't have the conflict and there's not the, you bought that for the boys and not the girls. And, you know, they really tried to, my hopes would be that if we decided to launch this, my hopes would be that they're purchasing things that benefit all kids, right? Maybe some weight room equipment that benefits all sports, you know, all athletes. So.
I think it would, you know, you mentioned benefiting everybody. I think sometimes there's a tendency of you know, that one area is super funded and one isn't funded at all, and that whole equality thing. And so I think a booster club, an overall booster club, in some ways would help level some playing fields, you know, and that kind of stuff. So I think that's something that, you know, that potentially could be a good thing, you know, to level out. But I think we have to remember that sports is a classroom. I consider it a classroom just like any other classroom. And ultimately, the school is responsible for that. So we just have to have an understanding, I think, that that there has to be mutual respect, and there has to be, getting back to my original point, some very clearly defined as to who's responsible for what and who's not responsible for what, you know, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Because it is a classroom, and classroom is a school function.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I could see some issues. There are certain sports that are considered more popular or more profitable, and those that are a little bit less visual, and I'd like to see those get as much as the others.
And some are more highly funded than others, you know, and that's a tough balance, you know. But I think every one is just as important as the other. But like you said, there's different levels of visibility, and so any sports boosters, I would want them to be very widely based, you know, without any special interests or special commitment to special areas. They would have to be very broadly based.
Okay.
Is it I'm hearing that I have the approval to kind of continue to proceed to see if there is that invested interest with this?
It might be good to form a committee. You know, I mean, we don't need more committees, but what I'm saying is just a broad group to get input from various levels. And
Sure.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Moving on to our action items. Action item A, do I have a motion to approve the 2020-2021 audit as presented?
so moved.
Support. We have a motion and support for the 2020-2021 audit. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Action item B is to approve Kim Schoner from part-time to full-time. We'll wait for a motion first.
Motion.
Support.
Okay. Scott, if you want to elaborate on what her,
Yeah, this would just allow us more hours for Ms. Schoner to help with our English language learners with the increase in population. Among her other duties that she does, she's a valuable asset to that program, and it's just going to give us, be able to provide more services to those 2-hour kids.
okay, we have a motion and support. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Action item C is to approve the National Honor Society trip to Chicago, December 11th through the 13th. Do I have a motion?
I would motion.
Support.
We have a motion and support. If anybody has any questions, Mr. Sean Murphy is the leader of this, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Is this a regular annual thing, Sean, or?
Is that on? Okay. Usually it's an every other year trip, so we did not go last year. So 2 years ago, just before we got shut down, was the last time that we were able to go. Originally, we were not going to plan a trip for this year due to all the restrictions. After talking with many of the seniors, who kind of felt like maybe they might get a little bit gypped out of not being able to participate in the trip this year. And researching some of the COVID restrictions, it's not as bad as what we thought it was going to be. The survey that I sent out for the students, the only thing that we are required is we have to prove either proof of vaccination or they have to prove a negative antigen test within 72 hours of us going. As long as they have that paperwork, then everything should be good. We do have to wear masks when we are in the buildings, so Museum of Science and Industry, there's a Broadway show that we would be looking at going to. We'd have to wear masks in the, in the theater. But other than that, the restrictions are not as tight as what we thought they were going to be.
So is this kind of run like the senior trip as far as parental releases and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, I have a medical release form that parents would have to sign. We have my wife would be one of the chaperones. She's a registered nurse, so that helps.
And you have funding for it, or is each student responsible for their own funds, or?
We do fundraising for the National Honor Society through our blood drives, and then they also have a student service day that they get funds for as well. The students would have to pay the remaining balance of the portion, and again, as the auditor claimed, we always try to budget a little bit high. So in factoring out the cost of the trip, I had told the students it would be probably right around $300, but more than likely it would be less than that. And then what we try to do is we give the students whatever money they have left, like if they've overpaid, we give that to them back on the trip. So halfway through the trip, I'm handing out $30 to them so that they have some spending money or something that they didn't expect to get back. So, but we do have, kind of like a cost breakdown of everything. I have not reserved anything yet because I wanted to make sure we had approval first.
Will they have to wear masks then on the train and all that too, right? Because it's federal?
Yes.
Okay.
Are there scholarships available for kids that cannot financially go, or?
We do have money that's in the account that could help cover that. We've never had to turn a kid away because they couldn't afford to go.
Okay, we have a motion and support. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Sean. At this time, it is once again time to open it up to public comment. If anybody has anything to say, if they could come up to the podium. Seeing none, hearing none, we will move on to our board roundtable. Give everybody a hot second to think about if there's anything they want to say.
Yeah, I'll jump right up in here.
Okay, go ahead, Denny.
Friday night was a cool night, and it was made possible by Pine River agreeing to put their JV players out there, so I think we ought to say thank you for Pine River.
You bet.
I would agree with that. I talked to their superintendent on Thursday. and thanked him very much. It would have been a lot easier for Pine River just to have canceled the game. They put in a lot of extra effort to make sure that we had a game. He's very kind.
Not to mention, it was a Pine River staunch Pine River parent that made those boards,
Yeah.
the board toss. So that had to be difficult.
Scott was wondering about the lighting project, how that's moving along.
Yep. Slow and steady, I'll say.
Pardon me?
Slow and steady.
Okay.
My hopes would be to have the gyms done before basketball season. I don't know if that will happen or not. I'll be in touch with him this week to see kind of where we're at. I think Mr. Murphy's room was completed not too long ago. They've been coming in on evenings and weekends.
I had called Brian Canals last week on a different, he's on the new sports board with me, so I was calling him about that. And as soon as he answered the phone, he said, "I'm working on it. I'll be there this weekend." So,
Budgetarily, is there any concerns on that project?
No, we have not. He has not invoiced us at this time.
So it's free at this point?
Yes,
Perfect.
with some energy savings.
I guess I'd like to thank admin and staff for the effort they put in to achieve these test scores that we're seeing.
Yeah, that's, absolutely.
And I guess I'd say thank you to everybody for the normalcy our kids are feeling this year. I think it was much needed.
Anybody to my left?
I'm good.
All good?
Yep.
Denny?
Have we made any progress on the soundboard in the gym?
Would you like me to answer that, Dylan? Yeah. So still working on a bid to get that bid out. We hope to have something to you at the November board meeting because the supply chain right now, we're looking at about 10 weeks out. So, and Dylan's really been working diligently. He's putting in a ton of time over at the preschool, which will hopefully will level out here pretty soon.
Thank you, Dylan.
I am registered for the MASB conference in November. I'm going on Friday and Saturday. So if anybody has an opportunity to join, and some great opportunities for education. So, but I'm registered for 2 days at this point. So.
Okay. I believe our roundtable has come to an end, so at this time, I'd like to
Would make a
entertain
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. I have a motion and I have support. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, meeting adjourned.